on staff at the Atlanta History Center. Today is December the 3rd, 2003. We are interviewing Jean Bowen Brown. Mr. Brown, if you would repeat your name and give me your birth date.
Jean Brown, April the 27th, 1927.
And where were you born and raised?
Atlanta, Georgia.
Tell me something about your family background.
Well, my family goes back several generations in Atlanta. We're native Atlantans.
Tell me your parents' names.
My parents' names was Agnes Lucille Bowen, was her maiden name, Brown. My father was Joseph Jackson Brown, and they were all from the Atlanta area.
Are you related to the Browns that were politicians in the state of Georgia?
I don't think so, but I can't say that for sure. I don't know.
What is your current occupation?
I'm retired, have been retired now for about 18 years.
All right. Let's talk about the time of sort of growing up in Atlanta. Where did you go to grammar school?
Well, I went to East Lake Grammar School, I went to Ian Ragsdale Grammar School, and I went to Smiley Grammar School. And then I went to O'Keefe Junior High School. And then during the war years, when all the men in the family went into service, I went down to Miami, Florida, where I had relatives down there, and I finished high school down in Miami.
All right. Well, tell me about World War II during that time in Atlanta. Where were you, and what are your memories of, say, Pearl Harbor Day?
Pearl Harbor Day.
Where were you?
I was at the 10th Street Theater on Peachtree and 10th Street. Every Sunday afternoon, I went to the movies. And I was in my customary seat at the 10th Street Theater.
And how old are you?
I think at that time I'm about 13, 14 years old, something like that. And when I came out of the movie, it was about 3:30 in the afternoon.
Do you remember what movie it was?
No, I can't remember the movie, but I do remember that the 10th Street Theater had a very unusual seating arrangement. They had what they call love seats, and it was a double seat where you and your date could sit in the same seat, and that was very unusual. I've never seen that before nor since, but that was at the 10th Street Theater. And when I came out of the theater that afternoon about 3:30 or 4, running down the middle of Peachtree Street with these newsboys hollering, "Extra, extra, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor." Well, I just was bowled over. I ran all the way from the 10th Street Theater down Peachtree to 6th Street. I lived on the corner of 6th Street and Piedmont Avenue in the Elliott Apartments. And I went home, and I can remember my sister was not feeling well at that time, and she was knitting an Afghan in the thing, and we turned on the radio, and we was listening to all of the broadcasts, you know. And
Tell me your sister's name.
my sister is Jo Helen Parker,
And how old was she?
she was in her 20s. I would say she was about, she's 12 years older than I am, so she must have been about 25, about 27, because she was already married, 27 at that time. And I had lived with my sister until I was 34 years old, and I got married, by the way. That's an interesting thing. She was kind of like a sister and a mother, too. During that time, this place that I was living on Piedmont and 6 was an apartment. And I think you had asked me about my memories of the situation at that time. I was an air raid warden, and I was responsible for the block of Piedmont Avenue between 5th Street and 6th Street, the block of 6th Street between Piedmont and Juniper, and the block between Juniper and 5th Street, the entire 4-block area. And my job was to go around the block to make sure that everybody's windows and there was no light escaping the houses. Have to have quilts or blankets or something up over the windows. And if I saw any light coming out of the thing, I was to go up and bang on the door and tell them to please cover it up. Another interesting thing about it, we had airplane spotters on the top of our apartment house and many of the buildings around Atlanta. And they were trained to identify different types of planes that came over. Also, a little known fact that not many people remember, at least that I've talked to, I've never heard anybody else remember the situation, was that Atlanta had a mock bombing, and they bombed Atlanta with 5-pound flour sacks. And the purpose of that was to see the collateral damage that might take place when a bomb was dropped in a certain location. The flour would span out like this, and they could probably get an idea about what maybe would happen. And to my knowledge, I have never heard another single soul ever say anything about that. And I've asked people if they remember that, and they don't remember it. And yet this happened around Atlanta.
Do you remember the story, or did you see it happen, or what, this flour sack, did you read it in the paper? How
Oh
did you know
no,
about it?
I was experienced it. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I experienced it. And we had a victory garden. Even though we lived in an apartment house, we had a green space in the back of the apartment house, and everybody had a victory garden. And we had our victory garden. And it did real well, too, as a matter of fact. We had a lot of vegetables and tomatoes and different things like that in the garden. Another thing that was fun, before that time, we led a very carefree life, and we played cops and robbers and cowboys and Indians and red light and all those kind of games. Well, the government started requesting that we gather up scrap iron. And so when we used to play games, now we collected scrap iron, and it was lots of fun going around. It was like having a scavenger's hunt. And everybody tried to gather as many metal type of things that they could find, you know, and we would gather the metal up, and it was sent off to the War Department to make guns and to make all kinds of military equipment.
You say we would gather it. Who is we?
Me, my friends in the neighborhood.
Who were some of your friends? Do you remember their names?
Joel, let's see, what was Joel's last name? Joel, oh mercy.
That's okay. It was a long time ago.
It was a
That's
long
all right.
time ago. But and girls, the girls too, the girls and the boys all went around the neighborhood gathering scrap iron.
What would you put it in when you gathered it?
We had sacks that we placed it in, and a big 6x truck would come by and gather up all these metal scraps, take it off. Another
So would you leave the sacks with the stuff in it on the side of the street, or?
I don't remember how we. I really don't remember what we did with it. But I remember it was lots of fun, and it took the place of playing those games, and we were doing something worthwhile. Another very interesting thing is that all the men were in the service at that time, and the cotton crop came about, and there was nobody to pick the cotton. They sent big trucks again by the high schools when I was going to O'Keefe High School, and they would pick us up and take us up to near Norcross, Georgia, and we would pick cotton all day long. And on my rear end, as a matter of fact, scraping down between the aisles of the thing, picking the cotton, and they have real sharp things on their fingernails would get kind of bloody from picking this thing, and I'd just push myself down the aisle, picking the cotton over here, and then backing up, picking the cotton. And I felt so proud. I had these great big poker sacks. They were tremendous, about this size, about this tall.
What kind of sack?
Poker sack.
Do you know
It's
how
kind
to
of,
spell it?
no, I really don't. It's brown. It's a brown sack, and it has kind of a weave to it. And we put the cotton in that. I had this tremendous, I said, oh boy, I'm going to really have it, because they were going to pay us a penny a pound. That was a penny a pound for the cotton. And I had this big sack just loaded, and I thought, whoo. We took it over to the scale. They had this big scale that balanced like this, and they hook on it, and they put my bag up on the thing, on the hook, and it weighed 30 pounds. So I got 30 cents from picking cotton all day long. And I was thinking I was going to really have a lot of money. But
How many days did you do that? Just the one, or?
That I just have the memory of that one time that I did that. But they did that all around Atlanta. I used to wrap bandages for the injured people, you know, in the service. They had the Red Cross headquarters on Peachtree Street at 6th Street and Peachtree Street, right close to where the Peachtree Manor Hotel is located today. It's not that hotel now, it's condominiums now, it's right on the corner. But on the other corner was an old Victorian house, and that was the Red Cross headquarters. And we would go down there and wrap bandages for the injured soldiers and everything at the place. And that was also the place that when Gainesville, Georgia had the 1936 tornado that was so horrible that they all was destroyed, this is where we collected clothes and all kind of food items and everything to take to Gainesville, Georgia at that same location.
Do you remember anything specific about rolling bandages?
No, other than just sitting at big long tables in there and having, and I don't even remember all the things about that, but they had all the materials on this table for us to have. And we had a certain way, there was a certain way they were to be folded and prepared, but I don't really remember any more than that. An interesting thing that I think that was interesting, the women in the family, everything was rationed. Everything was rationed. You couldn't get nylon hose. And when you could get nylon hose, it would be a line 2 or 3 blocks long, waiting in line to get you a pair of nylon hose. So I was elected since I was a child and I didn't have any responsibilities too much to go stand in line and get the nylon hose for the women in my family. And also for the people that smoked, we had to stand in line to get tobacco things. And we had these little tobacco machines that was about this long, and it had kind of like a white canvas thing to it that would come down, and it would be a little folder here. You'd pour the tobacco in there, and it had a little handle, and you'd pull it like that, and it would automatically wrap the tobacco in this little white paper that was inserted in there. And I used to wrap and make cigarettes with this little machine. And those are some of the, of course, everything.
Have you seen any of those machines recently?
I had one for years, but I don't have it anymore. And I don't know what happened to it, but I don't know whether people remember those days or not, but we did. That's the way we wrapped cigarettes. Gasoline was rationed, of course, and we had little stickers that we put on the windshield of the car, like A, B, C, D, that different categories of where you could get different amounts of gasoline according to your priority.
Did your sister have a car?
My sister had a car.
Do you remember what kind of car?
I think it was about a 1940 Chevrolet, if I'm not mistaken.
What color?
Gray.
Uh-huh.
Gray, 1947.
What letter sticker did she have for her rationing?
I'm not sure, but I think it was a C, but I'm not sure about that. And one of the funniest things, my brother-in-law, her husband, had relatives that had a farm down near Conyers, Georgia. And we used to love to go down to the farm because we were city folks, and it was interesting to go to the farm and see the cows and the chickens and all this kind of stuff in the garden. And we went down there one weekend, and on the way home, my brother-in-law was one of these smart folks. He was always bragging about, oh, I just get the best gas mileage on this car, and I've been going all this time on those tires, and he didn't get his mouth open good till we had a flat tire. And we had to get out of the car, and we had one of those old-fashioned pumps. I don't know whether you'd pump like this, and we'd put it on the thing, we'd pump, but we had to put a patch. We had all this materials for a patch. Patch was about like this where the hole was or something. We patched the tire, and we drove maybe 3 or 4 miles. Would you believe we had we had 3 flat tires on the way home.
Same tire or different tires?
Well, I think they were different. I don't know for sure. But I just remember 3 times we had to stop and put those patches on and pump them. And then we'd give out of gas a lot of times because my brother-in-law was the type that he wanted to see just how far he could go driving the car before he had to get gas, and it would get out so low, we'd get out of gas and have to go to the state. And it made my sister so mad she didn't know what to do because there was no excuse for it. We could have gotten it before, but he liked to see how far we could go. This brother-in-law I'm talking about served in D-Day in England, preparing.
What's his name?
His name was Harold Robert Parker, and he was in England preparing for D-Day. And then he had the points to be discharged when it was getting toward the end of the war. And so they told him that he would be coming back to the States or something. He got on the troop ship, and he sailed from Liverpool to what he thought was New York. Well, he went to New York all right, but when they got to New York, the ship did not dock in New York. It came right down the coast, through the Panama Canal, all the way to Manila in the Philippines. And after he had served almost 3 years in England, preparing for the D-Day invasion and all this stuff, he had to go to Manila, and he was in Manila for a couple of years over there, and he had the points to be discharged. And he was 45 days on the ship, down in the bottom of a hole of this ship. And as a result of that, he contacted yellow jaundice, I think it is, and he had a lot of medical problems. And I don't know whether it was something he got in the Philippines while he was over there. So when he came back, he immediately had to go into the Biltmore Hospital down in Coral Gables, Florida. And he almost died, but he survived, and he lived to be about 83 years of age. But he really did his part and more. He really, it's kind of a rough time like that.
Was there, you mentioned that you were an air raid warden.
Mm-hmm.
Did you volunteer for this?
I volunteered for that.
What kind of training were you given to be an air raid warden?
I don't really recall the training, except that there was I guess he was what you'd call a chief warden. I don't know what they called him at that time. And they called everybody together, and they gave us instructions about what we were to do, you know, and what we were to look for and all that.
Did you have any equipment that they gave you?
I don't remember any equipment. I think we furnished our own flashlights and everything, and I don't remember any special equipment. And at this time, I was just, I think I was about 13 or 14 years old at the time.
Did you enjoy doing it?
Oh, I did very much, because I mean, I felt like I was doing something, you know, for the war effort. Everybody, it was different from the way life is now. World War II was the worst of times, and it was the best of times, all at the same time. We had beautiful music, and I learned the jitterbug at that time. That's when I first learned how to do the jitterbug down at Piedmont Park in the pavilion down there by the lake, at Lake Claramere. And we had just beautiful music and wonderful movies, a lot of movie musicals that kept the spirits up of the people, you know, which was very important. It was how I enlisted in the Army, because I had gone to see Up in Arms with Danny Kaye and Dinah Shore, and I've forgotten, Dana Andrews, I think, was in it. And I was
Street Theater?
at a theater. And it just got me so pumped up, I just wanted to go. And I was so scared the war was going to get over before I'd be able to get in there to do my part. And I never will forget, when I did get into service, all of us was the same age. Most of the fellows were the same age. And I'm still in touch with one of the fellows that I met out at Camp Stoneman, California, and we went over to Japan on the same troop ship. He went to Sapporo, Japan, in northern Japan, and I went to Honshu Island in Yokohama. And we did not see each other for a year, and would you believe that when we both got ready to be discharged, that we came home on the same troop ship after not seeing each other all that time. And then we both came back to Camp Stoneman, California, and then I had the most freakish of accidents.
You may be getting ahead of us. Before
Okay.
we go on, tell me this friend's name.
His name is Nastasi, Charles Nastasi, N-A-T-A-S-I, and he
Where
was
does he live today?
where he lived at that time in Belmore, New York, Belmore, Long Island. And now today he lives at Henderson, Nevada. It's a suburb of Las Vegas. And we're still in touch today, and we communicate with each other over the internet and cards. And then he and his wife came and visited my wife and I here in Atlanta, and we just had a wonderful time showing him around. He was with Grumman Aircraft Corporation in civilian life, and he had something to do with the shuttle. And he was responsible for getting the shuttle from California to Cape Canaveral, Florida. And he came by Atlanta when he was responsible for the safety of the shuttle between that point. And he stayed with us 2 or 3 days, and I got to show him all around Atlanta. And then he and his wife came back later on and had a visit. And a very wonderful person. And this fellow, when we came back and went to I was stationed at San Pedro, California, waiting to be discharged when I got back from overseas. They kept us busy. They didn't know what to do with us because we were just there. So they had ammunition in these big caves, and they stored the ammunition, and I guess it was left over from the war, you know. So they had us to move the ammunition from one cave to another cave for no reason, just something to keep us busy. Another thing they did, they had these great big concrete mixers, and we were to scrape them down and then paint them, and they would prepare them for storage to be stored away for further use. Had these giant warehouses. We had a concrete mixer, 6-ton concrete mixer. This is unbelievable. Up on a truck, and we had 2 wooden planks coming down off the back of the truck, so this could come down on those planks into the warehouse. It was right at the entrance of the warehouse. Well, all of a sudden, one of the concrete mixers started coming off of the back of the truck down into the warehouse, and I was kind of standing out in the middle, so I had to just back up against the wall of the warehouse as far as I could, and I got on my toes and stood on my toes to try to get out of the way of the concrete mixer as it came rushing down the thing. Well, I got everything out of the way except my left foot, and it went across kind of diagonally like this across my foot. They were iron wheels on the concrete mixer, and it rolled over my foot, and it was so numb I had no feeling in it. And as I walked around, the blood started gushing out of the soles, the stitching around the soles of the shoe. And some of the other soldiers there noticed it and said, "Hey, you got blood just coming out all over your shoes." So they rushed me to San Pedro, California, to the McCornack General Hospital in Pasadena, which was about 45 miles away, at the height of the rush hour. I was more scared of the driving in the ambulance to the hospital than I was worried about my foot, because I thought, are we going to get that? Because they were just going over, turning like that. Got to the hospital, and they let me lay on the floor for about 3 hours or more, on a stretcher, just on the floor. And they asked me questions about what happened. I told them what happened. They said, if that had happened, that should have cut your foot off. And we left the shoe, took the foot out of the shoe, and it was left in the warehouse. So they said, that should have cut your foot off. I said, well, it didn't. And we had to go back and get the shoe at the base, and they brought the shoe to the hospital, and it was clearly, it showed where it crossed over my foot, you know. So then they allowed me to be entered in the hospital. They were not going to allow me to be entered into the McCornack Hospital until that came. Well, this Charles Stassi that I was talking about that went to Japan with me, he was in the medical corps. He had been assigned waiting for discharge at this McCornack General Hospital where I went into the hospital. They had a manifest up there of all the patients being entered into the hospital, and he saw my name on the manifest, and he came down there and he says, "Gene Brown, I recognize that name. I'm going to go down there and see if that's the fella I know." And it was. And this was near Christmas time, just like it is now. And he did all my Christmas shopping for me. He was just the most wonderful man. He did all my Christmas cards. He visited me every day. He was just so wonderful to me and so kind, and wrapped my presents, took them to the post office and mailed them. He's just a wonderful man, and he's just a wonderful man today. And excuse me, but it's one of the great benefits I've had of being in the service, because of the wonderful friendships that I had, because we were all young. And there was a sergeant in our barracks that was 30 years old. He was just 30, but we felt like he was an old man. And we would get in the bed, you know, in the barracks, you know, on the cots, and we would be talking when the lights would go out. The lights would go out at 10 o'clock, and we'd be talking, and he'd say, You fellas down there, shut up or I'm going to come down there and get you. But he would sleep in the nude. He didn't wear any clothes. And he would come walking down the center of that the aisle between the bunks. It was on both sides. And he would stand over anybody that he felt like was, talking, shutting up, Everybody would just lay real quiet and real still. Nobody liked him because we felt like he's an old buzzard. He was just such a... And he was just 30 years old. Isn't that interesting? But see, all of us were just young kids at that time. And,
I want to go back and get some exact information, if you don't mind. You said that you enlisted. Can you tell me when?
I enlisted October the 3rd, 1946 at Fort McPherson, Georgia. I was sent to Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Right, tell me what,
Oh,
were you still living with your parents?
I was still living with my parents.
Your parents? What did your parents think when you enlisted?
Well, my mother was especially sad. She just, when they took me down when I left the railway station at the old terminal station in Atlanta, my mother could not get out of the car. She stayed in the car and the rest of the family went in. I was the last of 7 children. I was the baby. And she thought the sun set and rose with me, and it just really devastated her. She wrote me every day that I was in the service, every day. And I was not that good a writer. I didn't like to write like that. I didn't write as much as she did, but she wrote me a letter every day. And just the one, I was fortunate that I had a real mama that really loved me very much, and I loved her, and I have marvelous memories of her. When we were out at Fort, I have an interesting story to tell
Fort
about
McPherson?
when we went out to Fort McPherson to be inducted and raise our hand and everything. They sent us to the quartermaster place, and we went through the line, and they issued us fatigue uniforms and hats. And as we went through the line, they were just slapping this equipment down to us, and then sending us off to a Quonset hut-like thing to be there. The first job that we had, it was in the fall time out at Fort McPherson, and what we at that time called the Southeastern World's Fair was out at the Lakewood Fairgrounds. The Army had a military exhibit out there. They piled up, we got in our fatigue uniforms, and the first job, they told us, they took us out to the Southeastern World's Fair, and our job, the very first job I had in the service, was picking up papers and policing the area around the military exhibit at the Southeastern World's Fair. And this fatigue uniform I had on, I weighed 109 pounds. I didn't even have to go in the service because the minimum weight was 110. But I bluffed my way in. They said, I said I could gain a pound. That was a lie, but I did get in.
Which service branch did you join?
Well, I was inducted at Fort McPherson.
Into the Army?
Huh?
Into the Army?
Yeah, into the Army, in the Army. And then they sent me to Fort Bragg, North Carolina to be processed, and I was there a short while.
Do you remember anything about Fort?
Yes, I have some funny memories. I have my experiences in the service was kind of comical. It was very much like Private Hargrove, exactly almost. We had to strip down again, cold weather, and they had these white footprints all over the floor where we were to line up and follow the footprints all around through all these rooms for the physical examination being processed. We got up to the place where they were checking for the blood. They put the needle in my arm, and it was so cold and we didn't have any clothes on, they couldn't get any blood out of me. And so they said, "Soldier, you just go over there and stand by the wall until you warm up and we can get some blood." And I had to go over there and stand with this needle just in my arm, just stand there and waiting, and then finally they got to where they could do this. But here we marched all over this thing following these footprints without a stitch on, cold weather. And then...
Remember what you were thinking?
I was thinking I was freezing to death. That was one thing I was thinking about. And I wondered why we all had to be, of course, now I can understand it, but I thought, well, why do we just have to march around here without a stitch on in all these places? But we got through with that, and after we were processed in Fort Bragg, we were sent to Fort Eustis, Virginia, on the James River for our basic training.
Tell me about basic training.
Basic training was a real experience for me because I led a very sheltered life, and I had never experienced, I'd never had a gun in my hand, and I took the training with an M1 rifle that weighed quite a bit, and I became a sharpshooter. And I never had a gun in my hand my whole life, and I was real proud of that. And I got a sharpshooter's medal, and that thrilled me to death. Now, I still have that medal. It means a whole lot to me. And then we took the infantry basic, and where they would have the barbed wire up with the machine guns firing, and you had to crawl on the ground like that. And I had a bad knee, left knee, and I was so afraid that it was going to swell up where I could not maneuver and carry on. But it never gave me any trouble at all. I had no trouble whatsoever. Completed 8 weeks of infantry basic at Fort Eustis, Virginia.
Do you remember anything, any experiences, food or friends or the barracks or is there
Well, I
any
just
sort of
remember it was
memory?
very cold. Well, then we had to take 20-mile hikes up and down the James River. I have memory of that. And I remember that when we got back from the 20-mile hike, that they had us all to strip down again, and they gave us flu shots and all this stuff when we got back, and we dreaded that. The first morning that I got up, this was interesting too, I don't know what to expect, but when we got ready to go to breakfast in the mess hall, the line going into the breakfast hall was a block or two long, double line. And then we had to stand and wait all that night to go. And I thought, my goodness, this was it. And everywhere we went was double time. We didn't walk anywhere. We double timed everywhere we went. And that was quite an experience. We could not, Norfolk, Virginia was close by Fort Eustis. Norfolk was a Navy town. And they warned us not to get anywhere near Norfolk because it would be rough. It would be very bad. We were not to be there. And the same way with the Navy didn't come over to Fort Eustis. But one day, all of a sudden, I see this lone sailor coming, walking down the street. He looked so funny because all of us was in these khaki-colored uniforms, you know, and here was this one sailor coming down. He just stood out like a sore thumb. But he had no trouble at all. We didn't bother him. But they did warn us about going over to Norfolk. Said that would be very dangerous. They told us to stay clear of that.
You said you went in at 109 pounds.
I
Did
weighed
you lose weight during basic?
I gained a little, but not much. I weighed 100. My total weight with my M1 rifle and my backpack and all the things that I had, I think weighed about 55 pounds. It was over half of my weight. When I was discharged from the service, I only weighed 114 and a half pounds. And I was just, well, I was thin. That's no way you could say about it.
How did you get through basic? I mean, was there...
I did extremely well in basic. In fact, I did better than many of my contemporaries there that were bigger and more muscular and everything. I was flat-footed. I weighed 109 pounds, but I would take the hikes, and I was able to hike at the full 20 miles and back to the base and not have any problems. But many of these fellows that you thought could stand everything, they had to be carried back in an ambulance. And another interesting thing that made me, it really did worlds for my feelings, for myself, my self-worth. When we'd go to get the shots and everything, a lot of those big fellows would pass out, and I never passed out. I didn't like it. We'd go through a door. They'd have medics on both sides of the door. When you'd go in the door, they'd jam you with a couple of shots over here in that arm and a couple of shots in that arm. And they told long tales about having this big needle that they would shoot, you know, just to scare everybody, you know, and it succeeded. They scared everybody. And we learned a lot of things about venereal diseases that I had never heard of before in my life, and that was kind of an interesting experience. But it was the best thing that ever happened to me to go into service and be associated with people from all these various backgrounds and cultures. And it was a wonderful experience that I wouldn't take anything in the world for. because it made me a much better and much stronger person. And I was very fortunate to serve on General MacArthur's staff when I was in Japan.
All right, well, let's get to Japan. All right, so you're in Virginia, boot
Oh.
camp, and then what happens?
Well,
Just
when
a
I
chronology
completed,
before you get to
all right,
Japan.
when I completed my basic training in Fort Eustis, Virginia, we had a 10-day delay en route. I came back to Atlanta, and a very interesting and historic thing happened to me then, not only to me but to Atlanta. I came home on December the 6th, 1946. That night, when I was in the bed, I heard all these sirens and going off, and bells and all this rattling stuff, and they got the Winecoff Hotel downtown burned that evening, right after midnight. It was on fire, and 119 people were killed in that fire, one of the worst hotel fires in the United States. It may be the record today. And what was so sad about it, there were a lot of young teenagers from South Georgia that were up on a convention in Atlanta staying at that hotel. And a lot of them were killed. And it was a very, very sad thing in Atlanta. It's one of the worst hotel fires at that time ever in the United States. That was that night.
Did you go down to the fire, or did you?
No,
read
I
about
didn't.
The next day?
I did not go till the next day to see.
Did you
It was
know
terrible.
anybody that knew
I
anybody
did.
there, or?
Well, no, but you know, the lady, Frances Winecoff, the owner of the hotel, lived in the same retirement place that my sister lives in, at the Campbellstone Apartments in Buckhead. And she lived there. She was one of the members of the family, of that Winecoff family. After the 10-day delay en route in Atlanta with my home, I got on a train in Atlanta, and my mother went down to see me off, and that's when she could not come into the terminal station to see me off. But I was on a train for about 5 days. We went through Montgomery down to New Orleans, from New Orleans across Texas, and it seemed like we were crossing Texas for 2.5 days or 3 days or something. It was forever getting through Texas.
Who else was on the train with you? Was it loaded with?
A lot of troops, you know, Army troops was on the train going out to the various bases in California. And on the train, they had some of these girls. I don't know whether they were following the soldiers or what they were, but they had this beautiful girl on there, and I was not very good looking, and I was a scrawny little kid. But this girl kept trying to get me to drink a zombie. And I had enough sense. I had heard about how strong zombies were, you know, and I think she was trying to get me drunk or something and take some money or do something. I don't know what she had in mind, but whatever it was, she did her best. But I never did drink the things. We went through California and then up through Fresno, where the state capitol is, you know, and up to Camp Stoneman, California. And then we got on the troop ship at Camp Stoneman after being processed again at Camp Stoneman. And I think it was it was an Army troop ship called the General Pope, I think it was. And we went over on the General Pope, and we were on the ship for 17 days crossing the Pacific.
What was that like?
It was miserable for me because I was sick every day. I was nauseated and just, it was just terrible. And my buddy Charleston Stassi that went over there with, we played a lot of hearts trying to keep our minds on. He didn't get sick, but I did. It just made me sick. And they put me on duty. I didn't care for MPs very much, and they made an MP out of me on the ship. And I was supposed to be by the galley, stand by the galley, and the fumes from that food in the galley, and they said if we left our post, we could be court-martialed. Well, I was standing there guarding the door for whatever reason, I don't know, at the galley, and the fumes passed by and made me so sick I couldn't stand it. I deserted my post. I went up those steps to the deck of the ship, and I just leaned over, and it was awful. But 17 days, and when right before we got ready to cross the international date line, another troop ship was out there. We had a typhoon, and we drifted for 3 days. At the height of the typhoon, on this ship that was about 60 miles from us, they got a radio message on the ship that a man was having an appendicitis attack, and they did not have, that ship did not have a hospital thing on. I was dead. So how we did this, because we were just drifting all that time, but somehow or another they got the ship over to this other ship and transferred the man on one of these stretchers in the air. Have you ever seen that? Where they have some kind of pullage between, and they put him on the stretcher and carried him across from that ship to our ship. He was operated on, and the two ships stayed close by each other. And then after the operation and everything, they put him on a stretcher and got him back on his own ship.
In the middle of the typhoon?
While that storm was going on or something, and like I said, we just drifted. That's why I'm not clear about how all that, was possible for them to maneuver closer to where that ship was, because we had been drifting all that time. Finally, the storm calmed down, and we got on to Yokohama, but it took 17 days. And when I got to Japan, I had a real interesting experience. When we pulled up at the dock in Yokohama, where I didn't know we was going to be stationed, that's where my permanent base was. I didn't know that at the time. But the dock workers down on the dock were going like this. And we was thinking, what are they doing? All these Japanese, doing just like this. I told you I weighed 109 pounds. My face was kind of long. I had a long face, and it was real narrow. And what they were doing, they were narrow face and long face. Japanese have round faces, kind of pie shaped. Well, they had never, I don't think they had ever seen anybody with such a long narrow. And so here's all these doctors going like this. We finally figured out what they were doing, but it took us a while. And that was my introduction to Japan.
Tell me about your job or your assignment.
Oh, I was fortunate again, because when I was in high school in Miami, Florida, I had an afternoon job at the Western Union. And when I would get out of high school in the afternoon, I would go to work at Western Union. This was during the war years, and I would work from 4 to 12. And I got experience on teletype machines, and I've forgotten what the machine is that has the perforated tape with the little holes in them that they pull through. I can't recall what they call that machine. But anyway, I took training. They taught me that at the Western Union headquarters. I had a wonderful supervisor, and she was from Ball Ground, Georgia, if you can imagine such a thing. I used to amaze me, Ball Ground, Georgia. But anyway, she was a wonderful woman, and she really trained me well. And I didn't realize at the time, God takes care of things in life, and He was preparing me for something that was very fortunate for me. Because when I got to Japan, as a result of this experience, they looked on my records, and they saw where I had worked at Western Union, and so I got a job in General MacArthur's satellite office in Yokohama as a person in charge of this communications office. General MacArthur would send the troop movement messages down to me, and we had what we call RTOs, Railway Transportation Office, and he would send these messages to his commanders out in the field. I would send them out into the field like that. And because of my experience that I had at Western Union, I had my commanding officer that came in, not my commanding officer, but the officer that was in charge, because I was a corporal, a technical corporal at this time. I went in as a recruit. I was not even a private. I went in as a recruit. I became a private. I thought I was really something when I became a private, because I had been a recruit. And when I became a private first class and it was posted on the wall, boy, I thought I was really something. A private first class Gene Brown. And then when I got overseas, I got my corporal stripe. It was a T corporal. It had two stripes with a T down at the bottom, which signified that I was not in infantry duties, but I was a technical thing. Well, after I was in charge of these Japanese, I had about 5 Japanese in the office. I spoke no Japanese, they spoke no English. We had to do a lot of sign language. But by a miracle again, my monkey motions and their monkey motions, we got things done and we could kind of figure out what we were saying. And gradually, they picked up some English and I picked up some Japanese, and I learned to say good morning, Ohio, like the state of Ohio. And then I learned a very important phrase, where is the restroom, please? Benjo wozoko desu ne? Where is the restroom, please? And thank you very much. Doi dashimashite. Good afternoon was Gonishiwa, and good evening was Kumbawa. And to this day, I still remember that. And when Japanese people come through Atlanta, I always do that, and they know what I'm talking about. They recognize. So it really stuck with me. But I had interesting experiences. I went to, I used to roller skate, not roller skate, but ice skate at the Tokyo ice rink with General MacArthur's son. He was about 12 or 13 years old at the time. And the Daiichi building was the headquarters for General MacArthur in Tokyo. It was located right across from the Imperial Palace. And I had to go down there to get different information and take different information back and forth. And
where did you stay while you were in Japan? Were you in the Army barracks?
Well, when I first got to Japan, after we landed in Japan at Yokohama, and that experience about to face it, they sent us to Atsugi Army Air Base. And would you believe they did not know what to do with us when we got there? We had to take basic training. They pretended like they lost our records. I had to take another full set of infantry basic at Atsugi Army Air Base. I had a double dose of it. And they told us, they were toughening us up, and they said, you look like pigs, we're going to treat you like pigs, so-and-so. And we were in the old Japanese West Point barracks. Big, huge wooden barracks with the windows, a lot of the windows broken out. The only heat in it was a pot-belly stove at one end and a pot-belly stove at the other. And in the middle of the two residential barracks places where the cots were was a day room, a big day room with pool tables and all this kind of stuff. The first night I was there, they put me on the guard duty to make sure that the barracks was safe. And while I was standing duty there, these Japanese, little fat, squat Japanese people came in and started circling me. And boy, I was scared to death. I backed up on the thing, and I just was prepared for most anything. And they were talking, but I didn't know what they were saying. And what they wanted was cigarettes. But I didn't know that. I was scared. I thought, well, what in the world? What is it they want? What were they doing in our barracks? Like that. But apparently they were workers there somewhere on the base. But fortunately, it was cigarettes they were after. But I didn't smoke, so I couldn't help. Wow.
Are you in Japan?
My entire service, other than my being processed, going overseas, and coming back, was in Japan.
When was VJ Day? Where were you on VJ Day?
I guess I was, what was I on VJ Day? I don't recall. I can't.
Because if this was Japan, occupation Japan.
I was in the occupation forces. And the only...
The war was over. Was the war over?
It was 8 months before the war was over.
Oh, 8 months, okay.
About 8 months before the war. Because I think the war was officially over in 46, 47, I've forgotten when the official day is. I had about 6 or 8 months in the official World War II thing. Because I was in the occupation forces of Japan. And I had a lot of interesting and funny experiences there, too.
Well, tell me some of your experiences there.
All right. One of the experiences is when I had to go to the bathroom. And I led a very private life. I was used to going to the bathroom and shutting the door, being very private. All of a sudden, I'm in a place with 16 toilets. There was 8 toilets down that side and 8 toilets down this side, and they faced each other, and there were no partitions. Well, I just could not do the things that I was required to do because I was just all these people looking at me and everything, and it just, kind of unsettled me. Well, I noticed that while I was in there, that this person would raise up like this, and then they would sit down, and they kept rising like this, standing up, and then sitting down. And I noticed that everybody was looking at me, just staring at me. Some of them were writing letters, and girls, I got some news for you. A lot of the love letters that you received was written on the John. They would be writing letters. Some of them would be reading the newspapers and just talking about what they were going to do on their passes or whatever. And all the time, it was just like pistons in an automobile going up and down like that. And everybody had their eye right on me. All of a sudden, I heard this roaring noise. They had automatic flushing toilets. And what it did, it just flushed all the toilets automatic, and it just washed you off practically from the thing. And they were waiting. They knew that I didn't know anything about it. It was my first time. And they were all waiting to see what would happen to me. Well, of course, when that happened, I shot up like this. My eyes bulged out like that. And that's what they were doing. That's why they were all staring at me, waiting for me to be initiated. They had a lot of fun at my experience.
So did you ever do that to the next new guy that came in?
No, well, I'm sure I was in there when that happened a lot, when the next guys came in. But the whole time in the service, I always had a guilty expression on my face, too, when I was in the service. When anything went wrong or something, I had this guilty expression when I really didn't have anything to do with it. And I'd be placed on KP a lot of times when I was supposed to be going off for the weekend pass or something and everybody was going to town. I'd have to stay there, and we had to scrub the bottom of the tables, the mess hall tables, the bottom and the top. And we literally did what you've told, take toothbrushes and clean in between the cracks on the floor and the walls. And our sergeant in our barracks said that he wanted our barracks to have the award as the best kept barracks in the place. And we had to bleach our floors, bleach the walls, everything in the trunk at the foot of the cot, had to be folded and set. All our clothes and the thing had to be just so, And they'd come by and take a quarter and flip it on the cot when we made the bed. And if the quarter didn't flip around like that, he'd come over there and yank all that back, and we'd have to do all the covers over again. And just had so many different experiences that were just really hilarious. It's hard to remember all the different things that took place. But
Well, do you want to tell me about coming home?
Coming home, I came home on the General Langston, another Army transport. And this fellow, Charles...
Was that trip easier or harder than the trip going out?
The trip coming home was easier, but it was still a long trip, and I was still kind of nauseated. And I've forgotten the exact length of time that that was, but I think it was approximately about the same length of time. Maybe not quite as long because of the typhoon on the way over. But I was on the bottom bunk. We had canvas bunks that were just about this wide, 6 deep. I was on the very bottom bunk on the floor, right near the head. The head is the bathroom. When you were laying down in the canvas bunk, you didn't even have room enough you could do your head up a little bit like that, but you couldn't, you just had to slide it sideways out of the bunk. The whole time that we were on that ship, that's the way we slept. And they were 6 deep. And hearing those people, that was not feeling well, all that noise, it was really, and it was hot, and it was a bad situation. But you do, best you can with whatever the situation. And then another funny thing, we had to stand up to eat. We had to stand up to eat. So when we'd go in the galley, this was interesting too. We had these metal trays, I think it was, it's been a long time, and we'd go through the line, we'd get the trays, and we'd go to these big tables that was like this, kind of high. We'd put the tray down, and every time the ship would roll this way, the tray would go down this way. And then you'd bring your tray back here, you'd take it back, and then the tray would go over this way. So the whole time, all over this mess, so here we are eating. Back and forth. Oh, me. Those were interesting experiences, but it was wonderful. Everybody was in the same boat. Everybody had a wonderful attitude, and it was just great. And it was toward Christmas time, see, when I was coming home then, right before Christmas.
Were you awarded any medals? Were you awarded any medals?
The Presidential Citation, Unit Citation, the Asiatic Pacific, the World War II Victory Medal, and there's still another one, but I cannot recall. I've got it, the things at home, and I have my ribbon things, you know. I had a disappointment when I was over there. At the time, it really made me feel real bad. All my buddies that I went over with came back as tech sergeants. I was the only one to come home as a corporal. There was a lieutenant that was in the Signal Corps that was sent to my office because he was not doing well where he was stationed in the Signal Corps, and so they sent him to my office. He had not had any experience in communications, so when he came into the office, he had to ask me what to do, which he did not like. And I had to show him different things, and I was very nice and very kind, and I never gave him any reason. But he was it just upset him a lot that he had to come to ask me, and I had to do all the things. So when it came time for promotions, he put me in. He could say he put me in for my promotion, but he waited until it was just slightly less than 3 months before I would be sent home to be discharged. And because I had less than 3 months to go, they didn't process the promotion. All the rest, and see, he did this just because he just couldn't, you know. And all my buddies came back as tech sergeants, and I came back as a tech corporal. At the time, it really bothered me a whole lot. But then I matured a little bit, and I thought, well, just what does all that? That doesn't really mean anything. It hurt me at the time, but then I got over that quick, and that didn't bother me. But it did at the time really bother me, because I should have deserved that, but he just didn't. He was from Brooklyn, New York. I'll never forget him, Lieutenant Jack Hochstetter. I'll never forget him.
Did you? You said that you, instead of going on leave, had KP a couple of times. What did you do when you went on leave? Did you get some leave?
Oh, yes. One of the nicest things that occurred to me, we got a R&R trip for a week, and we went down to Otami, Japan, and it was Emperor Hirohito's summer residential area. Beautiful place. Oh, we stayed at this Otami Hotel on top of a mountain with this gorgeous golf course, but you had to be a sharp golfer, because every time if you missed the green that was on the side of the mountain, it rolled down in the valley. But we rode the emperor's horses in his stables, and the bathtubs in the place were fan shaped, just like a fan. And you would walk down steps into the thing to take a bath. It was marvelous. But we slept on bedrolls, but the Japanese general rolled out on the floor, and it was a beautiful place, and I was really thrilled. That was my only trip that I got to do like that, but that was a wonderful experience, and beautiful area, and it was interesting to see a real Japanese hotel like that. I was fortunate enough, too, when I was in Tokyo, to go to the Toho movie studios, where the Japanese movie industry is, and I got to meet a lot of the Japanese movie stars and toured the sound stages. Rather, that was an experience. And I went to Ueno Park in Tokyo, where they have the memorial for the earthquake that killed so many people, in an earthquake they had over there that was very bad at Ueno Park. So I had a few times. I was afraid to get out, frankly, too much unless I was with somebody, because it was dangerous. We were the occupying force, and you just didn't know what. But they were very nice. I have to say this. I became very fond of the Japanese people, and they became very fond of me, because when I left, they brought me presents and everything when I left, and for my association there in the office. And beautiful farms. Their farms looked like gardens. They were just so gorgeous. They were vegetable farms, but they were manicured so beautifully that it just looked like you had gone on a tour of gardens. That's the way the farms looked. They were gorgeous. And when it rained, when I was there, the men and women wore kimonos. The men didn't wear Western things. They wore black kimonos with wooden shoes. They wore wooden shoes like in Holland, but they were not made up on the side. Like they were just kind of like a flip-flop with a wooden thing with a little strap that came across the toes, and you'd hear all these flip-flopping down the street, you know, going like this. And when it rained, the women and the men had umbrellas too the same way, but they had these big sleeves that had a pocket left. They kept the umbrellas. You never saw anything. But the minute it started raining, out would come these things, and they were real colorful, real bright colors, and it almost looked like a Mary Poppins movie or something. All of a sudden, here would be all these umbrellas with all these beautiful colors, like in the springtime flowers or something, and that was a sight to see. And I just...
Did you bring any mementos home from Japan with you?
I did. I brought back some beautiful embroidered kimonos with golden dragons down the back, you know, and all this, because they do this elaborate embroidery work, and they're very beautiful. I brought back several kimonos, and I was going to bring a tea set, but I had acted kind of ugly. I didn't smoke, and so when I would get my cigarettes, I would sell my cigarettes because I didn't smoke, and I would take the money that I got for the cigarettes to buy things to bring home. And I bought this beautiful china set, little cups and things, and you'd hold them up to the light and you'd see the Japanese figures, see that. And I took it to the post office, and while I was standing in line at the post office, this colonel was standing in front of me, and the MPs came up and got him for something that he bought. And it made me nervous. I said, Lord, I'm getting ready to go home. I don't want anything. So I turned around the line, and I did not take that home. But I did get home with a chocolate set that's real pretty, and we still have that today. It's a little kind of a brownish and white, and it has the little figures in the bottom. And that was all right. I could get by with that. So I got that home, and a few things, not a lot of things, but a few things. And I have a lot of pictures that I took while I was there. And our barracks where we stayed in Yokohama was right on the waterfront. And I had some interesting experiences with that too, because I did not drink. And they used to call me knee-high brown, because I would have a knee-high orange, and they would be drinking beer or whatever, you know, and they'd get too much to drink. And they always liked for me to go with them, because I would bring back one on one arm and another soldier on the other and get them back in the barracks safe. Well, I'd get them in the barracks, and some of them would have so much to drink, they'd be falling around the floor, and our barracks was on a canal. Well, I was afraid they'd get out and fall in the canal. So I was busy all the time trying to, you know, to keep them safe, you know, and well and everything. And then when we got ready to ship out to come home to be discharged, we had a big farewell beer party. And I knew they were going to make me try to drink beer. They had kind of a brown-colored bottle. I had sense enough to get me a empty brown bottle. And I kept the bottle in my hand like this. And I would just put it up to my lips like I was drinking beer. And I got to cutting up, because I've always been kind of extroverted and everything. I was not shy or anything like that. So I would just, and I got to singing, oh, the monkey wrapped its tail around the flagpole, around the flagpole. And I was doing all, because see, I had lots of experience because I knew exactly how they operated. I got home in the barracks, I crawled over the floor just like they did, because I was trying to protect myself, because I knew that they would try to get me drunk or try to do something. Not because they disliked me or anything, but it was the fact, this party. And I knew it'd make me sick. So I just kept that empty bottle, and I did all the monkey motions that they did. I knew I had it down pat. And to this day, if you bumped into any of my buddies, one was Lawrence Nees. You asked me if I could remember. He was from Old Hickory, Tennessee. And I remember his name. And my closest buddies, this is interesting. I was from the Deep South. My closest buddies that I had in the service was from Long Island, New York, Chicago, Illinois, Pierce, South Dakota. And I think the attraction was they were interested in me because they were learning about how a Southern boy lived in his coast. And I was interested in them because how the little Yankee boys did. And my very closest buddies in the service were all Yankees. And I had plenty of Southern friends that I liked too, but they were my closest buddies. And stayed in touch with them a pretty good while. But the one buddy that I had been in touch with for about 30 years, his name was John Melhoff. He must have been German, Mehlhaff, and he was from Pierce, South Dakota. He was a farm boy. And he was just a wonderful fellow. We kept in touch for about 30 years. And all of a sudden, I never heard another word from him. Well, I knew there was something bad wrong because you don't keep up, so you're not in the service, and you don't keep up all that length of time, and this all of a sudden. So my wife and I took a trip. We took a 10,000-mile trip all over the United States. And we went to Pierre, South Dakota looking for him, and we found the mail house, but we never could find him. And we asked him, said, do you have any idea where they could find? He said, well, one of the families of the mail house moved to Storm Lake, Iowa. Well, we wanted to see him so bad that my wife and I drove over to Storm Lake, Iowa, searching for him, and we found some mail house again in Storm Lake, Iowa, but we never did find him. And to this day, the only thing I can figure is he must have been in a wreck and was killed, or he died if he got some kind of disease, because I'm sure that after all those years, because we kept in close contact. So the only one buddy that I have from World War II today that I'm still in touch with, is this Charleston Stassi that lives out in Las Vegas. Wonderful friend.
We've got maybe just about 5 minutes left. Tell me quickly about what work, or when you got home, did you work, did you go back to school on the GI Bill? If you can just sort of sum up quickly
All right.
what you did after.
I was only home 10 days when I got a job. I got a job with the U.S. Treasury Department, temporary job. I got the job and was there for 3 months, and at the end of 3 months, the temporary job was over, and then I got a job with the Veterans Administration, and I was with the Veterans Administration, and that was like being in prison. We went to bell with the bell. We went to work with the bell. When it was time to go to lunch, the bell rang. When it was time to come back from lunch, the bell rang, and then when it was time to go home, the bell rang. And we had these case files, veterans case files, stacked upon our desks like this. You never saw the light of day. They never went down. Every day they just come. And after I worked there for about 2 or 3 years, I said, I've had enough of this. This is just terrible. Like if I had to go to the doctor or anything, I had to sign a memo that was sent to my supervisor, and then it went all the way up, if you can imagine, a simple thing like that, all the way to the top man, and then back down again in order for me to be able to go to the doctor. I got tired of that. I left, and I went with the U.S. Public Housing Administration, and which later turned into the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and I was with them for 39 and a half years and retired after working 39 and a half years.
When did you meet your wife? You said that was
I met my wife in 1959. I was a founder of a singles club in Atlanta called the After Hours Social Club of Atlanta for single people to go and meet other people of like interest and everything. And I was a host at this party, and my wife came in, and it was my job to introduce her to people around. And she was one of about 35 or 40 women that I danced with that evening. 2 weeks later, my buddy brings her to my Sunday school class at Peachtree Road Methodist Church, and she comes in and she recognized me. She says, oh, I just enjoyed dancing with you so much the other. Well, I didn't remember her from Adam's house cat, because she was just one of all these women that I was busy introducing and dancing with to make sure they had a good time. But my mama didn't raise any fools. And I said, oh, yes, I remember. I enjoyed dancing with you, too, but I really didn't. And I did not tell my wife about that until about 10 years later. But anyway, that's how we met, and the people in my Sunday school class got us together. We played bridge, and they'd say, well, you go pick up Charles, and I'd go pick up my wife, Charlesie, and we'd go out, and it developed from there. Fell in love before I knew what was happening, really.
Tell me when your wedding day.
My wedding day was August the 17th, 1961.
Married here in Atlanta?
Married here in Atlanta in the chapel. We were the third couple married in the chapel at Peachtree Road Methodist Church. And I got a fabulous girl she's a Georgia Bulldog, and I was a Georgia Bulldog. I went to Georgia State College. When I came out of the service, I worked during the day and went to school at night. But at that time, it was the Atlanta division of the University of Georgia. And we had full campus privileges, but we just went to school in Atlanta. My wife was over at Georgia, at Athens. And so we had a lot in common from that. And I just got a wonderful girl. We've been married 43 years now. And she's just a fabulous person. I got a much better wife than I deserve. Just a marvelous person.
Congratulations. Do you do anything with any veterans organizations?
No, I never was. I didn't want to be. That's another interesting story. I didn't want to join when I got ready to be discharged, they wanted me to join the reserves. And I did not want to join the reserves. I had had all I wanted of it. But when I went to work at the Veterans Administration, my boss was the commander of a unit in the reserves. He ding-donged me every day that I came to work for 6 months. And after 6 months of ding-donging and everybody and everything, I finally relented and said, well, I'll join the reserves. So I had a 3-year enlistment in the reserves, and I almost got myself in the biggest jam in history. I was down at summer camp at Fort Benning, Georgia, toward the end of my enlistment, the 3-year enlistment. The Korean War broke out. I almost had to go in the Korean War. And because I had less than a week to go before I was to be discharged from the reserves, I didn't have to go. Boy, that was a close shave. The unit that I was in was the first unit to leave Atlanta to go to the Korean War. Pictures was on the front page of the paper. Presented me with a tremendous dilemma, because a lot of these men that was in my office, they had wives and children, and I was single, and they left from Brookwood Station there on Peachtree, and I had to determine, do I go down there and say goodbye, or should I stay home? Because we had been together all those 3 years. I hardly slept that night. I was stewing about what in the world, what is the proper thing for me to do? I finally decided that I would go. It was extremely difficult, because it was terrible that all these men had. They were in the worst battles of the Korean War. I probably would not have come home. They were in the Pork Chop Hill battle. That was one of the most famous battles in Korea. They were also, some of them were in the Pusan area when they were backed up to the Pacific, you know, kind of like Dunkirk. And I missed that just by a week, less than a week, or I would have been over in the Korean War. And I doubt if I would have come back. So I was very fortunate, but it really got me in a jam. I didn't want to be in the reserves in the first place.
Is there anything you want to add that we haven't covered in the interview? Is there a story that you haven't told or an experience?
Lord, there's just so many things that's hard to get your mind. I've had so many wonderful experiences.
Did you think at the time that you were doing something when you were fighting in this war? Did you realize how historic it would be, that this war would be so historic?
No, I didn't at the time, but I did know this. I had a burning desire because of the things that I did on the home front before I went in the service. I wanted to do my part. That's why I was so anxious to go in the service. I didn't have to go in the service because I didn't have the minimum weight. And I told them that I could gain a pound, you know, if I went in. And I had a bad knee, and so I really didn't have to go. But I wanted to go. I wanted to do my part. And it was wonderful. I did my part, and I was served in MacArthur's satellite office in Yokohama. I had a wonderful experience. Best thing that ever happened to me in life, because it made a man out of me. And it was a wonderful experience, and I wouldn't take anything for it. In fact, I had such a wonderful experience in Japan that I felt like writing Uncle Sam a thank you note that I had the opportunity. But it was devastated. The Tokyo Central Station had everything bombed out, blocks bombed, you know, everything was just a desperate situation. To see old men and old women fighting over cigarette butts down on the ground, and the little old woman looked like she looked like 150, but she was just a little short lady. And she sang a little song that went, Sa la ba Yokohama yo, Marakuda ma de wa, she wa kare yo, Marakare yasu. That has stayed in my mind all those years. That little old lady, freezing cold, bare feet on those little wooden shoes, and the feet so cold that they were red, you know, and you really had to steel yourself because the times were very hard and it was pitiful and the situation was bad. And what they endured, they really, you know, I didn't, you know, it's bad. I saw all those war movies about the Japanese and how terrible things were, and a lot of people just to this day they can't stand it. But it's like, you know, the leaders cause the problems in the world today, the decisions they make a lot of times. And the people in the various countries, they're just like you and me. They did what they were told to do, and they responded the best they could. And they're really a wonderful group of people. It's just unfortunate that the situation, it's just like it's being repeated today. And the Iraqi people, for instance, I don't think they're bad people. It's just that they just had bad leaders that exploited them and treated them so terrible. And I think God is, you know, He planned your life like I had those experiences. I was able to go to college because of the service. I met those wonderful Japanese people, and I learned a lot from them. I learned a lot from my buddies that was in the service with me. It gave me compassion and understanding, and God provided me a wonderful wife that I never dreamed. I got a lovely wife that's very intelligent, very giving, very loving, and she loves it like my wife loves Atlanta, and she puts her money where her love is. She supports all the organizations all over Atlanta. She's a big music fan. She's given lots of funds to the Steinway Society, the Pro Mozart Society, the Atlanta Symphony, the Children's Theater. And my wife and I both love Atlanta dearly. And we do all we can to, we volunteered during the Atlanta Olympics in 1996, and we welcomed the world, and I just had the most happy and one. I feel so sorry for the people that said, I'm leaving Atlanta. I don't want to be here doing that. They missed out on an experience of a lifetime. It was the most exciting and most thrilling time to be in Atlanta, and I got to show people all over the world around Atlanta, and I was responsible for a British group, the handicapped people, you know. I had to escort, take them around different places, and it was just a wonderful experience. And a lot of times when you think you're going to have a bad experience, you want to get out of town, you miss out on wonderful experience, because it was the most fabulous time that Atlanta ever experienced. It was just wonderful. And it's just been a wonderful time. I've been very blessed in my life, extremely blessed, beyond anything that I could ever imagine. God has been real good to me. I have a nice home that I grew up during the Depression years when I wore pants made out of flowers cut up from my sister's dresses. And I wore Buster Brown shirts made out of Capitola flower sacks. It was very desperate. It was that way for years and years. It was World War II when we came out of this. If anybody had ever told me that I would be living in a lovely home like I live today, that I've had the opportunity to travel the world. I've been to China, and I've been to the Holy Land, and I've been all over Europe, and I've had all these wonderful, I feel so privileged, it's a privilege. And this wife I got, I keep going back to my wife, I got this wonderful girl that far beyond anything she could have married, much better. I was a poor fellow, I didn't have any money. I didn't have any looks, I didn't have any money. All I had, I did love her. And I was honest with her. I told her, I said, I really can't really offer you a great deal. I said, I love you, and I'll be a good husband, but I can't offer you a lot of things. And so she knew up front what she was getting into, but we've been married 43 years, and we have the happiest marriage, and she's just a wonderful person. And I'm grateful for my home and my family and my friends, and that I can live in this wonderful country. And
I want to add my thanks. This has been a magnificent interview, and for you to take the time to share your story has just, it's made a wonderful afternoon for me, so thank you very much.
Oh, well,
I appreciate it.
I asked your forgiveness for